Poker's legendary champions, next generation stars, and tireless ambassadors of the game, sharing their wisdom and guiding your journey to high achievement on the green felt. This is Chasing Poker Greatness with your host, Brad Wilson.
Hello there, my friend, and welcome to another episode of the Chasing Poker Greatness podcast. As always, this is your host, the founder of ChasingPokerGreatness.com, Coach Brad Wilson, and today's guest on CPG is the co-host of DAT Poker Podcast and one of the OG online nosebleed in-bosses, Terrence Chan. After finding himself in the world of gambling as a middle schooler and then running his own bookmaking business in high school, you could say it was almost destiny that Terrence fell into the world of poker. And it just so happened that as he turned 21 and was bitten by the poker bug, he received an offer to move to Costa Rica and help build and grow a tiny online poker startup I'm sure none of you will remember. And at PokerStars, Terrence found himself smack dab in the middle of poker history because in 2003, Chris Moneymaker was one of a handful of PokerStars satellite winners who played in the WSOP Main Event. And while you probably know the ending to that story, what you most likely don't know is what went down at PokerStars HQ between the time they learned Moneymaker actually won and the few short months they had to prepare for the inevitable Moneymaker boom. Let's just say that if you could spell the word poker, there's a good chance Terrence was going to offer you a job. So in today's show with the indomitable Terrence Chan, you're going to hear stories about what it was like working with beloved legend of online poker, Isai Scheinberg, how Terrence felt about leaving PokerStars so that he could find his limits in the world of professional poker, how he ultimately found himself locked in a cage battling against another human being in the world of MMA, and much, much more. So now, without any further ado, I bring to you one of the original online nosebleed in-bosses, and a human being who's shown time and time again he's willing to fail while daring greatly, the one and only Terrence Chan. Terrence, welcome to Chasing Poker Greatness, sir. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And as we do on this show, first question is, tell us about your journey into cards, and it's quite a doozy. This is not the lightning round. This is typically quite a lengthy question.
Yeah, no, it is like, I mean, I guess I was always playing cards when I was a kid. I'm an only child, but my main influence in gambling as a kid was my older cousin, who's 4 years older than me, and so he would just absolutely hustle me at everything, like Big Two. I'm not if you're familiar with it. He would just like start me with nickel stakes and then dime stakes, and he was just taking my allowance like the whole time. So I was always into that. And then even when I was, I think 12 or 13 years old, the local provincial government started sports lotteries, and the way those worked, where you had to get a 3-game parlay to hit, and it would be terrible juice, of course, but I was always gambling on those.
Where'd you grow up at?
In Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada.
Gotcha.
And so yeah, and but I mean, I don't know why, but I always liked gambling, which is weird. My parents aren't gamblers at all. My parents were the people who would.
How'd you get in action at 12 years old?
It's well, like I said, my cousin would hustle me, and I don't know. I'm sure that has something to do with it. But yeah, like my parents were the kind of people who would go to Vegas and pretend not to know each other and bet like opposite sides of Baccarat to get comps. Like that's how not gambling my parents are. But I just did this like when I was 14, the NBA moved in its 3-point line, and that's when I realized I could just bet the over on every game. So it's always been like a thing for me. I was running a sports book at 15, like in my school. Like people would just like, I would just copy the lines from the newspaper and bet. And
how does that start up? Like how does such a hustle start up?
I don't know. And I think we in Canada, like hockey pools are a thing, right? So the beginning of the season, like, everybody goes in order, you draft your team, and whoever gets the most points in their team in the end. So I think like it branched out of that, like, just 13, 14, 15-year-old boys really like sports. And, so you convince them to gamble. I mean, young minds are easily addicted to things. I mean, I don't look back and think intentionally like, oh yeah, I really, really like got them, like I was hooking them on cigarettes or something. But it was just like, it was such a natural thing. I knew enough math to sort of realize that if you took -110 on both sides, that you were probably going to win over time. As the government sports lottos had been doing the same thing to me. But yeah, that's how I started. And then when I went to university, that same cousin, he was like, "Do you want to go to the casino?" And I said, "Sure." And I went down there. And the first couple of times I played blackjack, which was fun for a little while. But then we went to a casino that had poker, and it had 4-8 limit hold'em. And this was 1998, I think. And there was just 10 people around a table, and they were smoking cigarettes, and they were just flinging chips into the pot, right? So if you've ever seen a 4-8 limit hold'em game, it's like 8-handed to the flop. And to somebody who'd only seen table games and casino games, it just looked like chaos. It looks like madness, right? Like everybody's got chips in front of them. Even now you look, poker is so much less formal than table games. Like sometimes I go and play blackjack, and you play like double deck blackjack, and you're not allowed to hold the cards with two hands because you might be doing something sneaky or something like that. And the bets how have to go in the squares. But with poker, people are just like flinging stuff in the middle. The dealer's just, pushing huge piles of chips. And I was like, oh, this is the thing I want to play. So I sat down. Obviously I lost. But then I started going on the internet, which was new in those days. And I started learning more about this game, and just learning more and more and asking questions on the internet every day, and ordering books online. And and then the rest is history.
When it came to like learning and progressing as it relates to strategy, why was it such a natural transition to like, oh, I just need to find information about this game and kind of see what's going on, and then eventually realize like, oh, there is an edge to be gained here?
There's probably part of it in my personality. I mean, I bring up that story about the NBA and the 3-point line to sort of illustrate that, like, even when I was in 7th or 8th grade, I sort of had this realization. It's like, well, if they're moving the 3-point line in, it probably means there's going to be more points. And so you hit that, and even when we're playing Big Two, I would strategize. So I was like, every game has to be beatable in some way, right? Like if there's some decision to be made, it has to be beatable, right? And when I played blackjack, for those few sessions, I played blackjack, and I was like, is this a skill game or is it a luck game? I mean, there's decisions. And then there was back when video games were on CD-ROM, there was like, I went to the electronics store, and there was like this bargain basement blackjack game, and I played it at home, and it showed the fundamentals of card counting. And it was like, oh, if there's small cards out of the deck, that means there's more tens and aces in there. You're more likely to get blackjack. Blackjack is your source of profit. If you're the player, you should bet more when small cards come out of the deck. And I was just like, whoa, right? Like, just a simple concept like that. I was like, oh, there's something to this. And then so I got on what was an internet forum then called rec.gambling.blackjack. It's if you were familiar with Usenet back in the day, and that led me to rec.gambling.poker. And then, so obviously if blackjack has, about that much strategy, poker has a lot more. And so people were writing these like, little essays back then on, how you should beat a 10-20 limit hold'em or a stud game or something like that. No limit was not a thing back then, but I was just like, wow, this game is really deep.
Yeah. I'm gonna show my age a little bit. Yeah. When I first started playing poker, I was 20 years old, and it was 5-10 lit. And there was no limit cash game. Like I remember the first time there was a no limit cash game, it was like 5-10 no limit. And it was just like, oh, okay, 5-10 limit to 5-10 no limit, no big deal. same thing. How different could it be? It's the same stakes,
Yeah, you're gonna buy in for 200, right? Like,
Oh no, of course. Like it's like buy in for like half my bankroll, whatever that was at the time. That's. But yeah, I mean, I remember the days of limit poker, and even beyond the 5-10, going to play like 40-80 at Commerce. That was like a crazy game. Just so many chips, and like the action, like so unbelievably fast paced. I mean, like the chips are just flying back and forth.
Yes.
That was a really fun game. I assume it's still spread at Commerce.
I think so. I mean, I think I do have I do have one friend who's like a pro in Southern California and who still plays those limit games, and I think they're still pretty good. I'm sure they're not the way they were that we remember them,
Sure.
but I think they're still pretty good.
Yeah. How did your parents feel about all of these entries into gambling? Did you ever get in trouble in school for bookmaking?
I didn't.
No?
Shockingly, I don't think. I think we kept it on the down low well enough, but I never got in trouble with school. My parents definitely weren't happy. I was, as soon as I could drive, I was literally climbing out my bedroom window when I was supposed to go to sleep, and then driving to the casino and playing. So they were super unhappy for a very long time. But then one good thing happened, which was that, from all this posting on the online poker sites, a guy messaged me out of the blue with a job offer. That guy's name was Isai Scheinberg, who I think probably everybody who listens to you knows who that is. And he offered me a job. And so when my parents found out about this, they were much happier that I sort of had turned my degenerate self into, find some way to the sort of real world, even if it was, an internet poker startup, which is, if you're talking about an internet poker startup in 2001, like, you have no idea whether this is going to succeed or fail. Especially if you're my parents and you're just a bunch of Asian immigrants in their 40s, like, you don't know anything about this. But it didn't matter to me. It was just like, oh my God, I can get a real job that's in poker. Like, that's super fun and super exciting. And so I think they were much cooler about that. And I did that job, for about 3 years, and then I quit to play poker for a living again, which again, they were much less happy about. But I was always very headstrong.
That little known poker startup, PokerStars.com. The listener may or may not have heard of such a platform. Did you have any plans on going to college? What did your educational path look like?
Yeah, again, I'm the child of Asian immigrants, and so all those stereotypes were sort of true, that I kind of was very much expected to get good grades in school and go to university, which I did okay. I got kind of good enough grades to just barely sneak in university. I kind of floated around for a really long time in university. I didn't know what I wanted to major in. I took courses, I took all the liberal arts courses at first, philosophy and history and journalism and all this kind of stuff. And I would be in class and I would have a David Sklansky book in the lecture hall and be reading that instead of a lecture. I was just so into poker, as I think is common, for people of that age when they get into poker when they're in university. I was way more into it than I was into any of my courses. And then so my advisor, after a time, all this kind of screwing around, my advisor says, okay, it's time to pick a major, time to get serious. And I said, okay, well, maybe I'd like to do business. And then she looked at my grades and said, you're not good enough to get into business. Your grades aren't good enough. And, I sort of said, in my mind, not out loud, but sort of an FU. And that really solidified my desire to go into business. And I was and then I studied really hard the next semester. I played very little poker, and I got accepted into the business school. And I ended up doing that almost out of spite. And then, but I would still, And so
it's amazing that button, how there's that button that if somebody presses it, you're like, okay, yeah.
Oh, really? Yeah. I wasn't really that into business, but now I'm super into business. Yep. And so I did 3 years of that. And that's when, that's the time where Isai kind of offered me an upgrade from kind of part-time work, which I was doing with them, to full-time work. He wanted me to move to Costa Rica. PokerStars was about to launch for real. They'd been in beta for a long time. They had a very long beta period, which was, I think, part of their initial success. And, and I said, well, I promised my parents I would finish my university degree before I took my job, because even though this is an offer of a lifetime, would you like to move to Costa Rica, make a 6-figure salary? You're 20 years old. Would you like to do this and work in the industry that you love? And I'd be like, yeah, but I have, this starting, now that I say it, it kind of sounds like Matt Damon and Rounders. I've made promises. I promised my parents, and Isai said, okay, do one more semester, then come work for us. And then Isai paid for my last semester to do online, and online correspondence school wasn't really a thing, but we found some. And he just wanted me badly enough that he was willing to pay for it. And he said he was a real, people don't really know a lot about Isai, but he was a real family oriented guy. And he very much had respect for the idea that I kind of wanted to honor my parents by doing that. And so that's why he was super willing to like pay for my studies. And it's like, yeah, okay, you want to finish your degree, you should finish your degree. I'll pay for it. And I was like, well, that's so above and beyond, because you're already taking a chance on this kid with no experience. Like my only job to that point was like, I work in the mall and sold clothes, and I worked at a gas station, right? Like he wants me to run a bunch of operations stuff at his online poker site. It was such a leap of faith. When I think back on it.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I don't know how many like obsessive younger humans there would be in the poker space that were willing to like move to Costa Rica
at that time,
work for the startup.
Like that's the thing is now, you look at the poker population, and it's 25 to 35 and sometimes even younger, especially if you look at the lower stakes. And those are the people who are in the poker. And if you look at a lot of the poker boom, the post Moneymaker boom, it was people in their 20s. But when I started playing poker, and probably you as well by the sounds of it, like I would be the youngest person at the table by like 15 years a lot of the time. I would show
almost
up for that
always
10-20 game, and like there was nobody under 45. And so like I to some extent you're right. Somebody who was really keen about poker in those days was probably a little harder to come by.
Yeah. Going back to what you said about like once people learned about poker, like young kids, and they become obsessed with it, it was kind of like all they did. I think
yes.
That is me in a nutshell, like resonates with me completely. I didn't do great in school and felt totally lost after high school. I hated school. Like I could not, it was not my thing. I just did not like it. And then I took the gap year. It was just like working at Applebee's, and one of my friends had gotten into poker, and I played a lot of spades with him. And then it was like, oh, cool. I'm going to take advanced hold'em for what is it? Advanced hold'em for limit players, or advanced limit hold'em, whatever that Sklansky book was.
Yep.
I bought that. I bought Super System. I read it, an hour before work, an hour after work, and just dreamt of being a professional poker player. And it was like all I worked towards. Just for like the first like 4 to 6 months while I was saving my bankroll before I moved to Florida to actually pursue it. But I mean, it was like you find purpose. It was like, wow, yes. Like I can do this thing. I can have freedom and autonomy. And it's like down to like how I perform. Like I'm in control of my own destiny. I don't have to like listen to somebody ordering me around and doing things I don't want to do. Like that was sort of the dream.
And I think there's something to that sort of idea that speaks to people. I think especially in that era, the sort of the pre-solver era or the pre-training site era, of people who didn't really like school wasn't really quite for them. Like formal education didn't quite hit the right notes in the way that it does for some people. That we sort of dove into poker because it was very much self-learning, right? Because you have these books, but these books were just kind of teaching you concepts. Right. There was no solver saying like, oh, on Jack 7-6, you're going to use this sizing. You're going to use this sizing with this range of hands and this sizing with this range of hands. And, you're going to check back these flops and stuff like that. It was just sort of like ideas, and you had to figure it out yourself. So it was very autodidactic. Like you kind of had to figure it out. And, because there wasn't online poker, you couldn't play like 100,000 hands and see what worked. It's this very nebulous sort of learning. It was hard to do. It was hard to like track how good you were, but that was part of the allure, I think, in just getting good at the game.
Yeah. Now that you say that, like it's 100% accurate in my case, because I know how I am. I love solving problems. And even before I had played the first hand of live poker ever, like I just believed that I could figure it out and that I could make it because like in school, like in math class, for instance, right? You solve a problem, but you need to do it in the way that they teach it. And like that, I hated that. Like I just wanted to figure it out on my own, kind of using like the tools that I had. And so like I would lose points because like I wouldn't show my work in the way that they wanted me to show my work. And I always hated that. And like poker was a game where like you could solve problems on your own and you are responsible for it. And I mean, yeah, that was just extremely exciting.
And again, especially in those days where, people played poorly and people like to make fun of pros from the 2000s because you didn't have to be that good. And that's true. But part of that is because we had to learn it all ourselves. So of course, nobody's that good. But there were a lot of different styles to win. Like I would look at, somebody would tell me, this guy's been playing professionally for 10 years. And I would be like, well, he does a lot of really weird things. And it was, because when everybody's playing bad, there's lots of different avenues to exploit. And in ways that probably exist to some extent these days. I'm not super knowledgeable about poker theory, here in 2021.
They exist. Yeah. We're 2022, by the way, Terrence.
Oh, excuse me.
We've changed years.
Yeah. I'm getting real old. They're all blending together.
I feel you.
I do, because there was no like kind of established real way to play back then. We were all making it up on the fly. And so you did encounter lots and so I would learn one thing from this guy and learn another thing from this guy and try to synthesize these things into like, okay, what does my game look like? And I don't know to what extent that exists today, but it was certainly fun at the time for me.
I know, like, as you alluded to about people looking down on the pros of like the early 2000s or saying like, it was just like free money back then. Like there were a lot of people back then that didn't make it, that couldn't figure it out, that didn't want to do the work, that busted out, like, because there was such a lack of education and tools to learn that it was on you. And it wasn't just you sit down and printed money every single day. Like it was still a grind. You were still learning. Like there was still this level of frustration. And I'm actually of the belief that like, if you can't make it today with the knowledge, like with the software, with the training, you couldn't have made it back then either. Because back then, like you had to bootstrap it. Like you had to take responsibility and there was nobody to hold your hand and tell you what to do.
Yeah. Poker's, unquestionably harder now. But there are also way more resources, right?
Exactly.
So like, if you want to get good, you should. Like you're not everybody is going to be like the highest stakes crusher, obviously. But if like playing poker for a living is really what you want to do right now, like you should have the resources to do that.
If you want to beat 1-2 No Limit Live or 5-5 No Limit Live, there's no excuse. There is literally zero excuse for not being able to make that happen.
Right.
But tell me about moving to Costa Rica. That's got to be a pretty fun, wild, exciting experience.
Yeah, it's people envision Costa Rica and it's like beaches and girls and stuff like that. But I was working pretty hard back then. I was 20 and I moved there with all my stuff. I didn't have a laptop computer, so I had literally like my tower computer in a suitcase. Just wandering around, didn't speak Spanish, getting help from Isai and his son, Mark. We did everything. We set up the office space and, hired IT people to set everything up. And it was just a lot of work all the time. It was very startup. But again, I loved every second of it. I never was one of those people that says like, oh God, like I'm working 65 hours a week. Like, this is terrible. Like, I don't want to do this. I don't have any time off. I'm exhausted and burnt out. Because when you're 20, you also don't really burn out. Also, we were just all excited about this business that we were building. And
what are some good memories about, those early startup days, hanging out with Isai and his son?
Yeah, it was, I think when we hit 10,000 simultaneous players, like the whole office kind of burst into celebration. We had this, we would set up I don't remember if it was a Sunday Million, but it was some Sunday tournaments that were sort of designed to get more players on the site. And when we hit 10,000 people, like that was amazing. When Chris Moneymaker won the World Series, it was really late at night, I remember. And we were just watching on a big screen. And when Chris Moneymaker won the World Series and everybody could see the PokerStars logo, that was mind blowing.
So you guys didn't have any advance notice, or you had to have advance notice. There's no way that you didn't, right? Because the ESPN of the main event.
Yeah, we were. What were we watching? I think we were maybe just getting reporting. I wish I could remember now, but I think we were just like hearing about it through Dan Goldman, who worked there at the time, and he was just sort of like relaying the information to us, and we were just hanging out in the office.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then we would find out that this was going to be so I remember, the World Series was, I think, slightly earlier than it is now. I think it was probably like the very end of June, and then we knew that it was going to air in, I think, August or September on ESPN. But so as soon as he won, like literally the next day, I'm like, give me all the resumes, like give me every customer, like every resume that has ever applied for this. I'm going through this again, and it still wasn't enough. Like I went on a hiring spree. We hired all these remote people. I went on the forums and I was like, do you play poker and want to work from us from your house? like send me a resume. And I hired so many people and it still wasn't enough. Because
so you knew that once your guy had won, I mean, and plus like the last name Moneymaker, I mean, just
so perfect.
Oh, you couldn't have scripted it better.
Yeah. And like that's the thing. It's like Isai and Mark, they did so many great things that they also, of course, got extremely lucky with that. I think I believe there were 830 people in the main event this year, and they put like 40 of them in. So, I mean, like their odds of one of them winning was not super high, like, but, no, like the next, I think party put in like 4 people. It was just like they like they sort of were like, let's put people in the World Series of Poker. Like, let's run as many satellites as possible. And remember, that's a gamble because you're taking money out of your economy, right? Like if you're giving people $10,000 seats to the main event, like it was hard to put money into online poker in those days. Like it's still kind of a pain in the ass. And so you're taking $400,000 out of the economy to say like, hey, maybe one of these guys can spin it up and maybe make a final table, right? And so they took that chance, but they got lucky, and it was. But when that happened, it was absolutely insane. And you mentioned the Moneymaker thing. Also, like what a cool villain in Sammy Farha, right?
Yeah.
Like how perfect was the 2003 World Series main event? You just had all these like mix of grinders. Like Ivy made a run, and Umberto Brenes, and all these guys who would become big names. But like Sammy Farha, like if you had to cast a Hollywood actor to be like sort of the villain in a heroic poker movie, it would look a lot like Sammy.
Yeah, it's really incredible, and I've had Matt Savage on a number of times, and I believe he ran that WSOP that Moneymaker won, and he was telling me that like a year or 2 years before, like that wasn't a gig. Like running the World Series of Poker was not prestigious, and there was a lot of thought that like this thing will come to an end, like it's not going to be able to move forward in the future, and like so really when you think about
Binions was going to go broke pretty much, right?
Yeah, you think about it, it's like nobody knew that it was going to like blow up on ESPN like it did. I mean, I was in the midst of learning. I was at Applebee's, like reading my book before my session, my work sessions every day. Work sessions, my shifts. Dear God,
that's what regular people call them, right?
Yeah, I think so. I literally had to like search my mental bank of knowledge to find the right word. But yeah, I was like about to go on my shift, or I was on my shift and just was watching it like in the bar area, it's just like on the TV on replay, like over and over and over again. And it just, poker went absolutely insane after Moneymaker.
It was such a good spot to have already been in poker and to already like understand a little bit about poker. Cause like we were talking about earlier, to bring it back, it was something you kind of had to learn on your own. And so, you couldn't go to a poker training site and, you couldn't hire a coach and all this kind of stuff. I mean, even those things are kind of expensive, if you're like a brand new player, but at least they're available. But like back then you had to already like play a little. So to be kind of decent enough at poker when the Moneymaker boom hit, that was the part that, if we're talking about quote unquote free money, like that's the part that the free money happened, was because you were already good at this thing that like people were just absolutely like they had no ideas what the rule was or what they wanted to play. And, that's when you just were like the guys who would limp and then just call like 12 BB, your 12 BB raise, and then they check fold on the flop, like, okay, thanks.
Yeah. I've told this story before. On Sun Cruz Casino, the first casino where I played poker, like we played overs one day. There were 2 out of 10 that wanted to play 5-10, and everybody else wanted to play 10-20. In a 4-hour cruise, there were 2 streets that were 10-20. like two streets, like not full hands. Like one of those two players was in every hand until the river, except for two rivers. Like, and that's just sort of how the games were back then.
Yeah, it was a good spot to be for sure.
It was. Unfortunately, if I would have gotten into poker like maybe 10 years before, but again, I was probably 10 years old, so that probably wouldn't have worked either.
Yeah.
But, you know.
You'd have secondhand lung cancer by now, so, you know, it'd be worse.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Like, it's possible to happen anyway. My whole family smoked growing up.
Oh, wow.
I like working at Applebee's, again, going back to that in 2003 or 2002, like there was smoking section, right? Like they weren't even smoking was still allowed in restaurants, which is just like insane.
I played in the Bellagio when you could smoke at the Bellagio.
Yeah, it's wild thinking back on it now. But after Costa Rica, I mean, what led to you, getting out of this 6-figure gig that you had in Costa Rica and pursuing poker?
It's a funny story. So Moneymaker wins the World Series, and we're continuing to work, and we're still really proud of this this thing that we've built, which is now just crazy big. It's still number 2 after Party, and would be number 2 until UIGEA. But a number of friends came down to visit me in Costa Rica, and they were their whole thing was, go to the beach, go to bars, meet girls, blah blah blah, things that foreigners do in Costa Rica. And they came down partly because they knew I was working there, and so I gave them the tour of the office, and they were all professional poker players. They were all pros who played on Stars and Party as well, and they were all making a living. All guys in their 20s, and so, I gave them the tour of the office, we met and had drinks, and I took them to the bars and all this kind of stuff. And then they went to the beach, and I went back to work, and then they went home. And I was jealous, obviously, right? Like, these are guys that I started playing poker with. We used to play in the same home game in the garage, and I was going back to work, but they were sort of living the dream. And they were doing it on this thing that I was creating. And I was, like I said, I was very proud to be part of the PokerStars team, but they were going to tell me about their next stop. Like they were going to go to this place and just play poker online, or not even play poker and just grind it back home, and I wanted to play tournament poker too. I would see like, oh, there's a tournament in this place, and a tournament in this place and this place. I mean, back then the tournament, the international poker scene was real. It was still very US dominant, but it was starting to take off in other parts of the world. Like Ultimate Bet had their Aruba thing. The EPT wasn't quite a thing yet, but there were tournaments in England. I was like, I want to travel the world playing poker. And I thought about it for a really, really long time. And then, and I looked in my poker tracker database, and I sort of like, cause every minute that I wasn't working for PokerStars, I was still playing, I was at home playing poker. I was grinding. Back then it was $100 sit and goes on Party. And I was like, you know what? Like I'm crushing $100 sit and goes on Party. Like I can quit my job, and technically, if I work more hours, I'll actually make more than I'm making. And it was a really hard decision because, like I said, like Isai put a lot of faith into like a young kid, and I did enjoy working for the company. And it was a little bit scary, right? Because playing poker for a living, like just because I'm winning now doesn't mean I will. What happens if I start running that? And of course, I ran like ass as soon as I quit my job. Like that's just part of the deal. But I did, and I submitted a resignation letter to Isai, and he was surprised but not shocked. And he wished me well, and it was great. And I continued to have a great relationship with him, and I did all the things that I wanted to do. I started playing online poker for a living, and I started traveling, and I would see friends, and it was the best time. And I'm very happy that I did that. I'm extremely happy for both of those experiences, that I went to work for PokerStars when I did, and also that I quit when I did, because it definitely allowed me to see so much of the world as someone in his mid and late 20s that, I think everybody should travel if they have the means to do it. So, cause it's just such a valuable experience for a young person.
When you think back to those days of leaving PokerStars and that excitement, what's the first memory you can think of that reminds you of joy in those days?
Um, I think the most joyous part, and I think this is true all the way up to now when I think about poker, is going to places, wherever the poker tournament of the week is, whether it's the World Series or something, some other stop, and seeing friends and to have that love, have the support and the camaraderie of friends in the poker world. It's corny, but it's so incredibly valuable as a person. When you're sort of like battling at the table every day and it's just you and every decision is on you. I went from being a part of this team and having this team identity of PokerStars to just being on your own. And so the friends that I made through the poker world, seeing them and getting to hang out with them, on dinner breaks or whatever, that's probably honestly like the best part. I mean, it's better than any, like huge score in a cash game, which I can't even remember, a lot of deep runs in the tournaments. I mean, I think just the community aspect of it was tremendous for me. And I think back most fondly, I'd say, upon that.
And, those are your people, right? Like they understand you in ways that like most other human beings walking the planet just don't understand poker players. And there's something that's really special in that.
You can tell them you lost 15K this month. And, you tell somebody, somebody at the gym, you lost 15K. And they would look at you like you're crazy. Like, do you have a problem? like what's like, they think, you're either, you're about to jump off a cliff or you have a gambling or like, you can tell them that, or if they had a huge losing month, you can sort of commiserate with that. And it is such a valuable support network. And like you said, these shared experiences too, like just these, I played a hand and this crazy wild thing happened. Whether it's about what happened, in the hand history wise, or just wacky things that happen in casinos from time to time.
Yeah, just good stories,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Do you have any specific memories of those days, like a specific fun time with friends?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how specific this is, but I would say the 2007 and 2008 World Series of Poker was when we shared a house, and now that's the most common thing, but I think it was actually pretty rare back then. I had in my house we had Matt Harvalenko, Gavin Griffin, Jared Enkenman, Bill Chen, and Matt Grapenthien, a bunch of others. And we just had great times in the house, and people would win bracelets. Not me, but other people would win bracelets, and
no bitterness.
Yeah, basically, it's awesome when like everybody in your house has a bracelet except for you.
Yes, it's great.
Yeah, and just I don't even know if this is like a one specific thing, but I remember, I mean, each of them winning a bracelet was great, but then just we would have one party every year, and just kind of schedule a day where like, okay, nobody's playing X tournament, like we're gonna have a party that day, we're just gonna invite people, we're gonna have it catered. It was great. I mean, I don't know that it was that I have like a specific, I can't point to like this moment in time, but just the general experience again of being in that house with those people, I think during those couple of years was the best. I mean, I think of that as fondly as I think, when you watch TV and people nostalgize about their college years, I think, and that's something that neither you or I will do because we didn't like school that much. But those are the best times with, like, as you said, your people, right? Our people, like everybody who's in the world that you're friends with, that you like hanging out with. And you get to celebrate their successes and commiserate with their failures. And yeah, I mean, I think that was the best.
Yeah, this is like really the driving force behind, Chasing Poker Greatness. The whole podcast is like meeting with my people and sharing their stories, right? Like, I don't know how similar that feels with you and your podcast, but it's I always feel like just a jolt of energy when I click off the recording.
Yeah. So, you talk about our podcast, which I do with Daniel Negreanu and Adam Schwartz. It's different. It definitely feels different. At times we go down these nostalgia trips, and I mean, I really enjoy, having walked down this trip of memory lane with you. But what's interesting about our podcast is Daniel is still in the streets battling. I mean, he's playing the Poker Go Cup like this week. I don't know if it started yet. But sorry, as we record this, I don't know when you're putting this out. But he's still, for as long as he's played poker, I guess 30 years now, still in there, still hasn't lost the love for games, still kind of looking at his solvers, and still he told us on last week's show, he's on the treadmill just watching other people's play for their tendencies. He's watching like old super high roller tournaments. Just, he's looking for tells, he's looking for bet sizing patterns. And I was like, wow, to be doing that, he's not an old guy, he's in his mid 40s, but he's also been playing poker since he was like a teenager, and he could comfortably retire, without ever playing a hand of poker again in his life. But he continues to do that, and he continues to have that fire, and that's admirable to me, because as I don't really have that fire to be like the best of the best at poker anymore. And when I first did get into it, I remember that feeling like we talked about earlier, and I had it for many, many years, but I ended up sort of diverting along other paths. And the Daniel is still at like 30 years into his poker career, watching film just to see what his opponents are up to is something.
Yeah, it just speaks to, as you said, his love of the game, and it's just a part of him that he loves and will probably be playing poker forever, like Doyle played poker forever, right? Because he loves,
and it keeps him young, right? Like, I mean, the thing is like, how people say like, how is Doyle still playing well at I don't remember, no, he is 84, 85, whatever he is. And it like part of it is that poker is keeping him young, right? Like it's refreshing his brain. He's still working on it. And Daniel too, I think, it's this sort of this pursuit of still playing. It's this intellectual pursuit. I'm the kind of person like I'll have that 7-8 year itch. I loved poker and I loved it intensely for super long time. And then I very intensely loved mixed martial arts. And so like I wasn't able to do the thing, but what's great about poker is of course that you can do it forever. And yeah, like he continues to study, and guys like Doyle. I mean, I don't know if Doyle's obviously not working with solvers, but he's still playing like these 15 game mixes where like some new low ball variant will show up. And that's incredibly impressive too.
And I think going back to Daniel, like his challenge with Doug, I think says kind of a lot about him. Like I know that he caught a lot of flack and was obviously going into it a big underdog. Like just by the nature of how it was structured, and he knew that, he was aware, EV. Right? Yeah, but he did it anyway, and like it was just this challenge to push himself to see how far he could go in X amount of time, and that to me is like quite admirable. I mean that is quite impressive, knowing that you're a dog, knowing that it's an uphill battle, you're battling a specialist specifically at their game that you don't specialize in. And to just do it very publicly in that way. I mean, it took a lot of courage and a lot of guts, and it was, yeah.
I don't think I can do that. I mean, I don't have that ability in me to sort of, I wish I did, because I think it would have made me a better poker player. Because one of the things that if I regret something about my poker career, it's that I didn't sort of dive into more games. I started off as a limit hold'em player, and then I became, like I said, a no limit sit and go player, and then I became a limit hold'em player again, and then I got so good at limit hold'em that I was making a lot of money at it, but I didn't allow myself to branch out and play, right? Because I was just like, this is my hourly at limit hold'em. It's really high.
It's a trap. Yeah,
it's a trap. Yeah, it's because I could play these other games. I could play the 8-game mix on Stars and like get better at all of these games. And I did
opportunity cost,
but I never did. And, I do wish I did more of that as sort of as a young person, because you're chasing hourly, all the time. Cause and there's manifest in so many different ways too. It would be like friends would call you to watch a movie and you'd be like, well, how much is this movie going to cost me? Because I'm in this really good game right now. And it's like, if you go through life like that, that's just bad. I mean, it's, on one hand, it's put me in a space where financially, like right now at my age, I don't have to do too much for income, which is really nice. But on the other hand, it's, like it would have been nice to, it would have been really fun to like be really good at 10 different games. maybe I'd have some of those bracelets I talked about earlier, because they're a lot easier to win in most of those games.
We got time, Terrence. We're not ready to like be put out to pasture.
Oh, I agree. And I have been playing more mixed games. It's funny thing is that now I have been playing more mixed games kind of online a little bit and studying those. And so, yeah, we'll see if I make it out to the 2022 World Series and take a few shots.
Well, what else you got to do? What else is going on?
What else? I've got parenting. Unfortunately, those are my primary responsibilities.
Those dastardly kids sucking all the energy and time and attention.
It's a lot.
The decision to enter a hand is fundamental to poker strategy. Too tight, and they know what you have. Too loose, and you're easy to run over. Pre-flop bootcamp from Chasing Poker Greatness is a comprehensive guide to locking down your pre-flop game and creating true range advantage. 8 days of guided training, over 60 optimal ranges, and access to a dedicated community of players that will push your pre-flop game from a place of weakness to your greatest strength. Go to chasingpokergreatness.com/bootcamp. Available now.
Before boot camp, I had been playing for maybe 15 years, somewhat seriously, always trying to get better, jumping from learning program to different learning programs and training site to training site. Kind of feeling a little bit lost, not really knowing how to go about getting better. And pre-flop boot camp just felt like a great starting point, a way for me to move from being a losing player to possibly a winning player. It felt like the right first step.
Once you jumped in boot camp, what was your experience like?
Well, first off, I realized that I'd been making a lot of mistakes prior to boot camp, kind of learning what ranges should look like and what hands should be played in what situations. It was exciting because I could see what other people had been doing to me, what I had been missing in my game. And then from there, just the whole camaraderie of everybody that's signed up, working together, trying to achieve that goal. That was fun. That's pushing each other and really helping one another, kind of feeling like you're a part of a team. It was a great experience. I enjoyed the process and I learned a lot.
What was your experience like playing cards post boot camp?
It's a totally different experience. It put me in a position to be successful as opposed to always being behind the 8 ball and playing catch up. I really feel like it's the foundation of a solid poker game. And since boot camp, I've been able to turn a profit and keep building on what I learned there. Being able to go back into the group and really work together even after boot camp was over. It's been awesome.
What's your sample size of winning post boot camp?
I think I have 70,000 hands played by now. I'm a father and I have a job, so I'm not a professional player by any means. That's my sample size.
Pre-flop Bootcamp is the flagship Chasing Poker Greatness training program. If you'd like to dramatically upgrade your pre-flop game, a new bootcamp launches on the last Saturday of every single month, and your link to join is chasingpokergreatness.com/bootcamp. One more time, that's chasingpokergreatness.com/bootcamp, all one word, or you can click through in the description box of this episode. Going back to, your pursuit of poker, let's hop back into your journey. After you came back from Costa Rica and were battling in the streets, having fun, how was that experience like? And then what led you to mixed martial arts?
It was great. I played, like I said, I played limit hold'em. I played at the highest stakes. I played to a point where I couldn't get action anymore. And that's probably what got me out of poker. Like I said, and this is another reason why, to anybody who's young and out there listening to this, who might be a poker pro, that's why you make investments in other games, because I did sort of reach the top, but you just stop getting action. And okay, sure. If you reach the top of no limit hold'em, like you will have made so much money along the way that maybe it doesn't matter. But and you can always still play in other games, but Limit Hold'em at the time, like it was a much more condensed player pool. So if nobody was playing you, like you're just not making money.
And you're a heads up limit specialist too,
a lot of it was heads up. And so, that's really tough. I mean, if people just don't play you, you're just not going to play. Like I can play Ring and I'm pretty good at it, but it's not what I prefer. And even then like full Ring, online Limit Hold'em was not really like going a lot towards the late 2000s, kind of post UIGA and especially post Black Friday. And then I wasn't going to be the one who wanted to go to California and grind it out in, like you say, the Commerce or places like that, because I mean, part of why I wanted to play poker for a living was the lifestyle. And to me, driving to the Commerce every day and living in Southern California to like grind it amongst like the degenerates of the poker world, which just wasn't my thing at the time. Like if you like doing that, then cool. But that's not what I wanted to do. So that's kind of was part of my exit of poker. And talk about when we get into martial arts, a lot of that was born of a drive to sort of be more active, and recognizing how much I was sitting on a computer, and I would so I was like, okay, so I should sign up for this kickboxing class. I met a dude in a bar in Costa Rica who taught a kickboxing class, and I went to his kickboxing class, and it was really fun. Around the same time, my cousin and one of my best friends was starting to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so I got into that, and that was really fun. And then as I got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the UFC started. It had its own sort of moneymaker moment with The Ultimate Fighter reality TV show.
Yeah, Griffin versus Bonner.
What's that?
Griffin versus Bonner.
That's right. That was Griffin versus Bonner was the moneymaker moment of the UFC. And so I was, I got into jiu-jitsu and UFC had taken off. So I was like, oh, I wonder if I could, like, I wonder if my jiu-jitsu is actually like good enough to win a fight. And then, my kickboxing background too. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do one amateur fight. I'm going to have one amateur mixed martial arts fight. So I started taking the courses. And by then I had almost stopped playing poker. Like I wouldn't say that, but what I would say is I would go online, sit at a 200, 400 and 500,000 stars table. Nobody would play. And then about half an hour before training started, I would sit out and go to training, and I would come back and I would click the sit-in button and nobody would play. And then like that's basically like, once in a while somebody would sit down and play, and they would like buy in for their, they'd be like 200, 400 and they buy in for like $4,812. And so like, that's how that this was a guy who just had a bad day at 30-60. Just wanted to like get it back.
Yeah.
And like, that's all the action I would get. And so I was like, well, I mean, I love doing martial arts, jiu-jitsu, kickboxing. Like I loved it in the way that I loved poker in the very beginning, and I wanted to learn everything about it, and do the exact same thing, buy books and buy DVDs, and just you can't physically train as much as you can with poker, but it was all that I thought about when I wasn't playing poker. And
how'd your parents feel about about mixed martial arts? If poker
I guess if
was
there's a
rough.
theme of this podcast is disappointing my parents. My dad didn't care so much. My mom is an incredible worrier. I mean, she's the one who worried. I mean, I think every mom worries if you decide to quit your job and play poker for a living. But my mom is a world-class worrier. I mean, she's like in the top 0.1% of worrying.
In boss, yes.
She is an absolute worrying end boss. And so I would never tell her about a fight until after it happened. And I'd be like, this is what happened, I won. And when she would find out I would have a fight through like random other means, like I would mention it to like a friend who had a friend who knew like my mom's friend, like, it would come back around to, I heard you have a fight, be careful. And I was like, I don't know if be careful is the advice you want to give, yeah. But sure. I know what you mean, Mom. But yeah, I mean, most moms aren't super excited about their kid being punched in the face, but I loved it. I mean, it was great.
And leading up to that first amateur fight, I mean, mm-hmm. Can you tell me about the experience just pre-fight, the day of, because that's got to be a pretty intense experience.
Yeah. So about, I still remember this, 18 days before the fight. So I've been training, for 6 weeks just for this fight. I was training with a more experienced opponent, and he hit me with a body shot to the ribs that I have never, to this day, felt as much pain as I did. And I thought I broke every rib in my rib cage. I went to the hospital that night, and they told me ribs had separated. And so I thought oh, there's no way I was going to be able to fight. I remember not sneezing until the day before the fight because it was too painful to even do that. I would roll out of bed sideways. When I drove a car, I couldn't drive a car. I would have other people drive me around because I couldn't turn around the shoulder check. I thought I was going to pull out of the fight. And then maybe 6 days before, I did some practice and I was like, okay, I can do some stuff. So suffice it to say, I wasn't super confident going into the fight. I sort of knew I had this big injury, this big problem. And I knew that if he kind of threw one good shot to those ribs that I was going to double over and lose.
Yeah, or God forbid that you have to sneeze in the middle of the fight.
Yes, exactly. So I was a nervous wreck. But one thing I learned, and I didn't know this at the time, but is that almost nobody goes into a fight 100%. Because there's so much, if things are going well for you at the poker table, you can just abort and there will still be a game tomorrow. But fights are scheduled weeks in advance. If you pull out, the promoter may not give you another fight because now you're unreliable. The promoter's trying to get a certain number of fights on the show. You pull out a week before the fight. So a lot of the times people just, especially at the lower levels, accept a fight that they're not ready for, that's not ideal, that's really suboptimal. And that was me at that time. So I went out with just a game plan of I have to take this guy down and get on top of him and make sure I don't take damage, focus his energy on getting back up or defending, as opposed to, being in this sort of kickboxing range where he could just throw a strike and end the fight at any moment. So I'm going through all this in my head, and my coach knows this too. He knows about my injury. And so all we're doing is takedowns. All we're doing is takedowns for this fight. And so luckily I did. I basically blitzed at him. I got a single leg and I got it to the floor, and I took him down for the entire first round. Round ended. I took him down in the second round, and I got to mount and I just punched until the ref pulled me off. And it was the biggest relief ever because I really thought one good shot could end this. I mean, one good shot can always end it in a fight, but as compromised as I was, I don't think I would have taken a good body shot. If you knew about the injury.
Yeah. You were especially vulnerable.
Yes.
You mentioned not being reliable for the promoter. And I have to imagine your life situation was quite different than most fighters who are entering the game, where you don't really need the money, right? You're not really doing it for the
Well, it's
money.
An amateur fight. Nobody gets money.
Okay. So you could have pulled out, right? And found another promoter, gotten another fight somewhere if you wanted. I think you wanted to.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm advising, let's say you took me and you wiped my memory and I didn't know what happened in the fight, and you took the 41-year-old me and sat down and had a conversation with that guy, I'd be like, pull out of the fight. You'll get another one. Don't worry. But that is the prudent thing to do, because I just look at you can't do anything right now. Don't do it. But it is, you just want to fight, right? You've trained, you've worked so hard, the opportunity to do it. I mean, just sort of imagine as a poker analogy, to people who have they've never played their first World Series of Poker event, right? And they study and they work so hard and they grind up their bankroll, and then they win a satellite the night before. And then what happens on the day of something happens that you shouldn't play. Maybe you got a little bit sick, right? Let's talk about the pre-COVID era, where being sick didn't mean you might necessarily kill somebody, but you're not feeling it today. Those guys will still play, right? Because you've just won a satellite. This is what you've built up for so long. And fighting is very much like that. You've been beat up for 8 weeks. Guys who are bigger, stronger, better, more experienced than you have just kicked your ass for 8 weeks. But your one glimmer, the one thing you've been holding on to, is that I will get to perform on this day, right? I get to compete on this one day. And then to say like, no, I can't do it. Like that is so hard. It's so hard to do, even if you're getting paid $0 for it, because you just want that experience. And like I said, at the time, I thought it was going to be the only one I would do. Like I thought that I was like, okay, this is it. Like I will have scratched that itch. But as is often happened with itch scratching the itch actually makes it worse. Mm-hmm. It's actually a really bad metaphor, because everybody knows if you scratch a mosquito bite, it just comes back more itchy.
Yep. And, you know, you mentioned this like exuberance, right? This just like inner feeling of wanting to do something at all costs, that like, you know, if somebody were to ask me in my current version of myself, if I go back in time to like 2003 and they're like, hey, I'm going to like save up $5,000 and move to Florida to pursue playing poker professionally. Like you'd be like, what? No, don't. Like your chance is so minuscule, right? But like, when you're in it, I think sort of that just desire and want and passion is so powerful for, you know, young adults and people that are entering something else that they just love, that like you just can't stop them from doing it. They will make it happen.
It's not necessarily even wrong. You know, like I would say, yeah, exactly. I would go advise myself not to do that, and you would advise yourself not to do that. But the thing is, when you're young, it is sort of the time to take risks, right? So like, you know, if you're 53 and you go broke, that's a fucking disaster, you know, because that's like the time where, you know, you're saving up for retirement, like you should be set. If you're 23 and go broke, like not ideal. Okay. Nobody wants to go live with their parents when they're 23, but you're going to make it. Like you're going to be okay. As long as you didn't like get yourself into some debt that you can't dig your way out of, you're going to be okay. Like in the poker world, like you can get staked, you can get backed, you can play the smaller stakes. Like you can
get a job okay. And save you can get a job for a bankroll, you know?
Exactly. You're going to be okay. You don't want to go broke at 53 or 63. Like that's a real problem, because you just don't have that earning potential. And so when you're talking about like, should I take that risk at age 23 of taking the $5,000 and making it my poker bankroll and moving to Florida to play? A lot of times the correct answer is yes, because you don't know what the upside is, because it's so asymmetrical, right?
Yeah.
What's the upside of somebody who's 60 and wants to play poker for a living and takes like all their money to move to wherever and grind poker? Like, what's the upside? This guy could be the greatest poker player of all time, but they maybe only has like 10, 15 years to like capitalize on it, right? Whereas if you're 23, like, hey, maybe your earning potential really is that big, right? Like maybe you really do have this opportunity. You know, me working for PokerStars, right? Like, so a lot of in the very beginning when I worked for PokerStars, like, you know, they didn't pay me like a lot right out of the gate, but you know, they did eventually. They did it because they just didn't have a lot of the money at the beginning, because you know they're a startup. But there's so much risk. Like, you know, you tell somebody you're going to go work for this internet poker gambling site that doesn't actually have any customers yet. There's an excellent chance they never would have made it. But if they didn't make it, like, so what? Big deal. Like, just go get a job somewhere else. But it did. It ended up being this really big company that gave me great opportunities and treated me really well. And a lot of the people that I hired as literal $5 an hour, because it's Costa Rica, customer support people, a lot of those people are now executives at PokerStars now. I mean, you know, so it's very asymmetrical. When you're young, like taking those risks is actually very logical. I mean, you know, and when you're older, then, you know, naturally you're more conservative with your risk taking. Sorry, a bit of a tangent there. But, no, just to say, like, I didn't want this to come off as like, oh, like, you know, the old guys are always telling the young guys don't take risks, because I don't think that's true. Like a lot of young people should take risks within reason.
And it's honestly, it's kind of intoxicating too, taking those risks. Like I remember, so in the past couple of years, like, so as I've transitioned from full-time grinder to like Chasing Poker Greatness podcast and building courses and coaching and all that stuff, you know, my Tactical Tuesday co-host, John, he had never played a hand of online poker before like mid 2020 during the pandemic. He was like live player, transitioned to online poker, and started at like 100 no limit, because I was like, yo, you just started at 200 no limit. Like you're rolled for, I don't know why you would start it. And he's like, I'm scared. So over the course of like 6 months, he goes from like 100 no limit to 1K no limit. So 510 online, and he's like crushing. He's just like crushing. And like the energy that I would feel when we did our coaching sessions, I mean, it was like all those memories kind of flood back on you. And it's like, man, this is me, right? Like, holy shit. Like he just wants to see how far he can go. Like and that tolerance for risk of like, yeah, like live at the bike, production ended. I'm going to go over there and like take a shot at the 50-100 game just to like see, it was very refreshing. It reminded me, it got me excited about poker again, just living, vicariously through my student who was going through the journey. And yeah, I mean, those times are just ultra, ultra exciting. And I'm in agreement with you that like when you're young, you have few responsibilities. Like you can take those risks, and they're actually not as big of risks, I guess, as they feel in the moment when, as you said, it's asymmetrical, right? Like you blow through 10K. Well, you can save 10K up again if you need to.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, this is borne out, like even just finance portfolio theory, right? Like, you go to a financial advisor, first thing they ask you is how old you are, right? And like the financial profile they build for a 22-year-old is very different from the one they build for a 52-year-old, even if they have the same amount of money. Because the fact is that the 52-year-old just doesn't have as much time to live. And so, you're just going to keep that conservative, and because you just want them to have like a good remainder of their life. Whereas, the 22-year-old can take a little more risk. Yeah.
After going back to MMA, so you scratched your itch, which led to more itching.
Yes.
Tell me about what happened after that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I knew immediately I wanted to do more. I was like, well, shit, if I can win a fight with these completely messed up ribs, like I want to see how far I can go. And I was, I was 30, I think, or 31. I don't want to be under the impression that I was going to be a world champion, but I was just like, how good can I get? Like, how far can I go? So, had another amateur fight. This was funny. It was a mixture of MMA and poker because there was an APPT event in Korea. And I had a lot of friends over in Asia from the time I played in Hong Kong. So, a lot of them messaged me like, let's go play this tournament in Korea. Okay, sure. Never been to Korea. Like I said, if you get an opportunity to travel and you can afford it, you should always go. And when I was I think what I was doing was I was searching for places to train on days off of poker. And I found like there was this amateur MMA competition that was also in Korea around the same time as the poker tournament. It was on the other side of the country, but South Korea is not that big of a country. And so I registered for it. It was funny because if I had gone deep in the tournament, I wouldn't be able to play for it. But I was just like, when I registered for it, I just was in the weight class. I registered for my weight class.
What was the structure? Is it like the old school UFCs? Like,
no, it was just like a thing. And the website was only in Korean. So I had to use like whatever Google Translate or whatever. And I found one friend of a friend who spoke Korean who could help me out. They were just like, it was just like 18. It was like a lot of fights. It was like 20 fights. You can still see it online. And there were a lot of the ones, they were just like 75 kilograms, such and such against such and such. But some of them were like 61 kilograms, such and such versus TBA, or such and such versus blank. And so you could sign up to be one of those blanks if you were an amateur. So that's what I did, right?
I could be TBA.
Yeah, exactly. And, I did a quick search of that guy's name, but I couldn't find anything. But it turns out like, I just wanted to make sure like the dude wasn't the next John Jones,
yeah.
Basically. And I looked and I couldn't find any indication of him like suplexing a dude through the Earth's crust. So I was like, okay, sure, I'm in. And so
as a little tangent, going back to Stephan Bonner, he did fight the next John Jones. I remember looking at that matchup online. Like John Jones didn't even have a profile picture. It was just like a silhouette in the background. Like,
yeah, that is a funny callback too, because I very much remember that fight because like Bonner was the name person in that fight. And so it reminds you of like a lot of the poker matches that are subsequently like a guy that everybody's heard of because he was on ESPN in like 2006 or something like that versus an internet pro. And like the people who know the favorite is, but the people
Absolutely.
who don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, so I just took a train, and I was actually a sponsored pro of another startup at the time, a startup that didn't end up making it, but they sent, so the guy went over with his camera intent to like record this footage, cause this is real good content. I think is like a guy comes over for a poker tournament, ends up getting in an MMA fight. I win this fight, but barely. Like I was exhausted and just like barely had anything left in the tank. Thank God it's amateur. It's only 3-minute rounds. Cause if you watch the end of this video, like I'm just on the floor, like just I cannot get enough oxygen into my lungs. But I win the fight. So now I'm 2-0 as an amateur. I leave Korea and I go back to Hong Kong, which I had an apartment in at the time. And that's where I was living actually, as I was playing online poker, and I was in Hong Kong. And I went to just the gym where I was training, and one of the guys there, he was a promoter of a new fight league called Legend, which was an MMA promotion in Asia. They'd run 7 events. They were going to run their first event in Hong Kong, and they wanted a local guy. And so this was 3 weeks after that fight, and they said, "Do you want to fight in 2 weeks?" And I said, holy shit, like I don't know if I'm ready for a pro fight. And I go and look and I Google the name of the other guy, and he had fought in their promotion, and he looked terrifying. He needs the living shit out of this. Sorry, I don't know how tolerant of swearing you are here. I've been trying.
It's the internet, We're totally cool.
Your gambling. If your gambling podcast has kids listening to it,
the original title was "Chasing Fucking Poker Greatness." But
yeah, there we go.
They didn't let me do that.
No. He need this guy into oblivion, and then he got tired and lost. And then
but that's the roadmap. Need to oblivion.
Yeah, well, he dropped this guy like 3 times real badly with knees, and then he just got tired and lost. And I showed this to like my coach, and I was like, my coach at this point now is he's younger than me, but he's like a very old school Brazilian guy, and he's like a anywhere, anybody, anytime kind of guy. And I said, should I fight this guy? Like, am I good enough to fight this guy? He said, yeah, Terrence, you have a heart. This guy don't have a heart. You have a heart. You win. You fight this guy. You win. And like, I'm gonna win on heart. Like this is what we got. Like I came to you for strategy. Like I came to you, like the way that a poker player would, right? Like hey, like if you're the guy who plays you play 25-50 at the local casino, and you're a reg in that game, and I'm your friend and I play 5-10, and I'll be like, and if I go up to you and I say like, hey, like, am I good enough to play in that game? You're going to tell me the truth. I hope, right? Like you're going to tell me like, no, like this lineup is brutal for you, right? You're going to give me the commish to my Mike McDermott, right?
Yeah.
Like, but no, like my coach Rodrigo was just like, you have a heart. You have lots of heart, Terrence. You fight. And I was like,
if I remember correctly, heart was a major component to Captain Planet. And so like it's a strong attribute to have, Terrence. Don't undervalue the heart.
I agree, but it's just, it wasn't what I was expecting. But I did it, and I won that fight too.
Through heart? And
I don't know. You can watch the fight and see how much heart was involved. I won it with an armbar, so I mean, I there's some. I don't know how much heart I put a lot of heart into that armbar. Yeah, and I mean, so once I'd won a pro fight, like, boy, like, you thought it was now it's really on. So yeah, I mean, that's how it went. And I as you start building a record, then promotions start becoming aware of you. They contact you like, hey, do you want to fight? Hey, do you want to fight? And most of the time I just said yes, because I did want to fight. I was always in shape. And I also had this realization that like, I'm in my 30s. I don't get to do this for forever. And even though I'm not going to be a world champion, like I do want to see as far as it goes. I should take as many fights as I can. And I did. I took, I think, basically every fight that was offered to me. The only fight that I ever turned down was because I had actually, I'd injured my ankle, then had a fight, and then the guy contacted me afterward, and I was like, no, I really need to. I fought this one on a bad ankle. Like, I want to be ready for the next one. And so I did end up fighting that guy, but I fought him like a year later. And yeah, that's kind of how my MMA career went. I mean, I won some and I lost some, but every experience.
Speaking of losing,
yeah,
what was the first experience like losing an MMA fight?
I think because, I mean, it sucks obviously, but I think because I'd never really had this expectation that I was so great, I don't think it didn't devastate me. I did think I was going to win, but I didn't. And the thing is, I think the thing with training in mixed martial arts is that you are so often beat up in the gym by your training partners that you very quickly realize like where in the pecking order you are, right? So there will be guys in the gym that it doesn't matter if it's his worst day and my best day. Like, I'm just not going to beat this guy, but that's okay. Like, he's better than me. He's making me better. We're sparring partners. We're not being locked in a cage. He's not really going to kick my ass. Like, he'll stop when I say, please stop. There's just so much less variance, right? And we come from poker, which just has so much variance. Like, you could play the absolute killer lineup, the 10 end bosses, and you could still win that tournament or that table or whatever, because it's poker. So it wasn't. I would say, I would even go as far as to say that if I went through my entire career undefeated, I would be a little disappointed, because that would mean I never challenged myself to a point where like somebody, could beat me, unless it was like a fight that was just like 5 rounds of 25 minutes and I barely squeaked it out. So I'm really actually like quite grateful for the losses. Don't get me wrong, I'm still super salty about all of them. Like both of my, I mean, I have 2 pro losses and 1 amateur losses. The 2 pro losses are both stoppages that I thought could have went longer. Like especially the second one, my last one, which was the retirement fight. I very much like wanted to like get back. I got knocked down by a punch, and the ref just kind of jumped in what I thought was too quickly. And, I was immediately protesting, and I was really upset about that one because I knew it was going to be my last fight. I told my girlfriend, we just had our kid, like, this is the last one because, I want to be there for my kid. So I was really, really crushed about my second loss, probably more than my first loss. Because the first loss I don't think it was an egregious stoppage. I think I could have gotten out of there, given a little more time, and I would have gotten a round 3. But I mean, I was unquestionably losing that fight. The other one was like a 5-round fight, and I just got knocked down in the first round, and I thought that I didn't get a chance to recover. So I'm super salty about that. But like I said, like, I mean, that guy's in the UFC now. Like I don't have anything to be ashamed of for that loss. Like, I wish I had more of an opportunity, but I'm very much grateful that I challenged myself to that level, and I didn't just like cherry pick. I didn't bum hunt, right? In poker, bum hunting is probably good, at least to a degree, because that's how you're going to get paid. But if you're doing something just for the pure pursuit of it, then you don't want to bum hunt. You want to get as far as you think you can go.
Yeah, if you want to find your limits, then you will inevitably fail. And if you never fail at something, if you never have setbacks, you're not seeking to find your limits. You're staying within your comfort zone. What lessons from poker did you carry with you that helped you in your MMA career?
Yeah, I think it was just, being real analytical and having the patience to study a lot, to, go over not just the technical aspect of how to throw a punch, how to do a sweep, how to wrestle, but also like, nutrition and sleep and sort of optimizing all of that stuff. You see this now in poker, and the trend took hold late in poker, with now everybody, meditating and recognizing the value of eating well and getting a good night's sleep. That was not the case, obviously, 10 plus years ago in poker. Like poker was just this thing that you showed up to, you drank Gatorade at the table and smoked, right? Like, like you smoked, and like the most successful players in the world were like all smokers and beer drinkers. And now they're all, now everybody just like meditates and eats grass-fed beef all the time. I think those were the big things, is just to take that approach, because it was not common in MMA back then. And now it is starting to be. Like, you have these places like the UFC Performance Institute that are teaching people, like, this is how you dehydrate for a weight cut. This is how you rehydrate. Like, this is how you should approach your strength and conditioning, right? Like MMA for most of its career up until, or most of its life up until the last handful of years, was train as hard as you can, come back and do it tomorrow. It turns out that that's not the way to optimize growth. You need rest days, you need off days, and taking a rest day or taking an easy day does not mean that you're a wimp. It means that that's like the optimal way to train, because if you train hard on Monday, train hard on Tuesday, train hard on Wednesday, your performance will suffer on Thursday. You will not make these gains. Whereas if you train hard on Monday, go a little lighter on Tuesday, and then train hard again on Wednesday, your Wednesday performance will actually just be really good. And that's where you're actually going to grow and gain things. And it's something that I think sports scientists and other sports have known, but MMA being such a meathead sport for so long didn't have that. And I just took that approach. I'm like, who can I learn from? Because I'll say this, we didn't talk about this a lot, but in poker, I think like the vast majority of my success is derived from the fact that I just had people who were smarter than me. I was hanging around people who were better at poker than me and smarter than me all the time. And so when I got to MMA, I was like, the only way I can replicate this success is to like seek those people out. And we talked early, when you're first getting into poker, like, yeah, we have the Sklansky books and all that stuff. But eventually, like you do have to learn from other people. And I was very fortunate to learn from some of those people in poker. And in MMA, I would seek those people out online, and I would be like, this guy wrote a really interesting thing. I wonder if he would answer an email, and just kind of go in there and say like, send me an email. And most of the time, these guys are really approachable. And, because it was a niche sport back then. So yeah, that was just sort of the attitude that I took towards it, is just to just learn everything you can about this thing, about this pursuit, because people are going at it in a very meatheady way. There's a lot of real analogs to poker in the time that I did it, and MMA in the time that I did it, because poker, in the early days before, again, proper studying, was mostly people just putting in hours and kind of getting better. And there being sort of the survivorship bias of, okay, these guys haven't gone broke yet and they're pretty good. They don't necessarily even know why they're any good. They've just put in a lot of hours. And MMA is very much the same thing. Like, these guys have just put in hours on the mat and, in the boxing ring. But there are better ways. There are ways to learn, especially if you're somebody who is not coming at this from, I don't have an athletic background. I'm just a guy who's taking this up in my 30s. Like, I wasn't like a college wrestler, and I wasn't like a martial artist since I was 5 years old.
Yeah, you have to work smart. And part of that is finding out people who have done all the things, that have learned the lessons through all the hardships that you don't want to learn, right? You're gaining their wisdom. And even today in poker, I think this is just a very pivotal thing that you need to do. You don't have to go about it on your own. There are people who have experienced and lived a life and gone through it that you can ask, and that, are typically more accessible than you might think. And one part of that, at least like in my case specifically, like when someone reaches out to you that is on the path that you were once on, and they're seeking guidance or help, you just feel compelled to share what you learned with them, because that's what you would have wanted, right? You see yourself in this person. And that's just, I think that's just human nature, or I don't know if it's every human's nature, but it's my nature. And the reality is, like, that's got to be the same for most any other pursuit in the world.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's almost like a cliche that sometimes the older generation gives the unsolicited advice to the younger generation, but it's so much more like you say, like when the younger generation, or not necessarily younger, but less experienced, reaches out to you, you're like, oh, this is an opportunity to impact a life, right? And that's not something you get every day. It's a special thing when it does happen, and like it is very much like a pay it forward thing too, because I have, and I'm sure you had too, like these mentors who helped you through a large part of your life, and then there's you can try to thank these people, and you should be grateful for them that they were in your life, but to some extent there's only so much you can do. There's not much you can do beyond that. The one thing you can do is to sort of pay it forward to the next generation of people who are kind of doing the things that you did. And that's, I think, probably the best way to honor the people that helped you when you were in that spot.
Yeah, now you're going to get inundated with amateur mixed martial artists who are also poker players after this episode.
Yeah, I mean, all three of them, I'm sure.
Come on, there's at least 5.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we haven't had an MMA poker, a high profile MMA or kickboxing poker fight in a while. That was a thing that kept happening 10 years ago. But
yeah, I remember like seeing on Twitter, there's footage of like you battling Huxeed at like the WSOP.
That's right. That was really funny. Yeah, we had a wrestling mat on. We were down to 6 tables in like the 1500 triple draw, and we almost got kicked out of the casino. But yeah, it was just, I mean, that's just hilarious because Huck is, I'm a 5'7", 140-pound dude who's done jiu-jitsu for a long time. Huck is like this mostly untrained dude, but he's like 6'5", and everybody says he's like the best athlete that has ever that's ever graced the poker felt. And he is, apparently. If you ask like Jason Kuhn about Huxeed, like it's amazing the stuff that he can do at like 48 years old or whatever he is. But yeah, we had a grappling match, and I had him trapped in an armbar, and he tried to slam his way out of it. It's just it's a hilarious video because the security guard breaks it up, so we never really reach a conclusion. But it's just perfect. It's a perfect thing because it shows off how like a smaller, more skilled guy is going to do well, but it also shows off how like just being kind of an athletic freak gets you out of some spots. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, he just dropped you on your head.
He did just drop me on my head, but it wasn't
on your head.
Wasn't a real hard surface, so it didn't bother me much.
I couldn't tell what the surface was in the video, or my memory can't recall it. Yeah, so man, this has been great, and believe it or not, as I said at the beginning, that first question is quite a doozy. So haven't gotten around to the lightning round questions, but let's ask a couple of them. Unfortunately, I know I'm disappointing the CPG listener, but I have another podcast in 5 minutes. We'll have to schedule a round 2 with Terrence Chan to get the rest of your poker journey, and then also these questions. If you could wave a magic wand and change one thing about poker today, what would it be?
Stalling, of all varieties, like stalling on the bubble, as well as like this looking at your whole cards and balancing how long you need to do to do this pre-flop thing. Probably just like pace of play.
I could not agree with you more, and you've just like ignited something in me. Like I don't play tournaments, and I can't I think I played like one tournament in the last probably 5 years, one live tournament. And like, it's just it gets to me.
The thing is, you might not play poker tournaments, but like the poker tournaments are so many people's gateway into poker that are sort of new and amateurish. And the experience of these people who just like stall near the bubble or near a pay jump, or just because like they need to fucking balance their like look at just it's you they're gonna defend the big blind and ace king, like they need 5 seconds to check.
Yeah, I don't play tournaments because of stalling drives me absolutely insane. I just can't. It's like, oh my god, like how are tournaments constructed in a way where stalling is like incentivized? Like stalling just makes you money in poker tournaments. Isn't there a better way to do this? Like,
yeah.
because stalling is incentivized, right? Like you do make money by stalling, which is why people do it, right? So like basically you have to remove that incentive, and I'm not exactly sure how.
And, that's why
done,
that's why your phrasing of waving a magic wand is like great. Like you would literally have to wave a magic wand and hypnotize people into not doing it. And then again, like all these pros who really feel like they have to be perfectly balanced in every situation. Like you've played Limit Hold'em, so you realize like how incredibly annoying it is if a guy needs to like take 10 seconds to act on every action in a limit game. It's
different incentives, because like in cash games, you're incentivized to play faster because you get more hands per hour, which increases your hourly rate if you're a winning player. So it's like, it's just a different incentive. And I'm sure there's a way to do it, and maybe some genius will think of it down the road, but like, oh my God, that would just be the best thing ever to eliminate.
It makes the experience just so bad. And I am a recreational player now. Like I'm the guy that, it's just such a terrible experience. And it's just a terrible experience for people who are new to poker or people who are recreational players. The only people who can tolerate this, honestly, are tournament pros.
Yeah. If you could put up a billboard, every poker player's got to drive past on their way to the casino, what's your billboard say?
I mean, can it say stop stalling? I don't think I would be very effective. The thing is if I thought it would work.
Ourselves.
Yeah, I was like, if I thought it would work, it might be that. That's tough. But another answer that isn't as bitchy as my other answer would be play more games. Because like I said, that's probably one of the regret for my career is that I didn't delve into playing more games, and everybody wants to play No Limit Hold'em because that's what everybody plays and that's all the money, but it doesn't have to be that way. And a lot of the other games are really fun. So you should play lots of different poker games.
Awesome. And any project you're working on right now that's near and dear to your heart?
Not so much. I mean, I'm just trying to have a family and be a family man. But no, I enjoy doing the podcast with Daniel Adam. I enjoy doing things like this with people like you occasionally. I do some UFC betting, some live UFC betting. And so, no, I keep myself occupied with fun things that I want to do, but I don't have any ongoing project at the moment. I wish I did.
And final question is, if the CPG audience wants to learn more about you, where can they go?
I mean, I don't know why you'd want to do that. I'm at T-Chan Poker on Twitter. I have to work on getting my blog back online. It was terrencechanpoker.com, and it had, if you like the MMA stories, I have a lot of MMA stories up there and on there. I haven't been able to get it online. Maybe by the time you've released this, I will have gotten off my ass and done that. But yeah, you can Google my name in YouTube and see some fight videos if you want. But yeah,
also the podcast. We can direct them there.
Oh yeah, DAT Poker Podcast. It's on Daniel Negreanu's YouTube channel, or just subscribe to DAT Poker Podcast wherever you get this and other fine podcasts.
Awesome, man. It's been great having you on. Well, let's schedule round 2 in the very near future. We can get to some other questions besides your story, and also maybe we probably skipped over a bunch in your story as well.
I think you did a great job. It's been lots of fun.
My pleasure, man. Take care. Have a great rest of your day.
All right, you too.
Thanks for listening to Chasing Poker Greatness. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or on your favorite podcast app. Go to chasingpokergreatness.com to get the newsletter, join the Greatness Village community, book a coaching session, or dive into the latest data-driven poker courses. Follow the show on Twitter @CPG Podcast.